Afternoon, everyone, from Dunrovin Ranch in Lola, Montana. I am really excited that this afternoon we're going to hook up again with Michael Academia from the Awesome Osprey Project last summer. He just did such an outstanding job of guiding us through the entire season with visiting experts, keeping us, informed and keeping us collecting data from all of those wonderful nests. It was just a really exciting summer, and now he's been at the College of William and Mary for the last semester. He's just finished the semester, and I can't wait to hear what he has been doing and report back to us on the data that he collected from the 12 nests that we were following. So I thought before he got on here with me that I would kind of go through a little recap. Well, not a little recap. I've got quite a bit of stuff here. On our summer here at the Osprey's Nest here at Dunrovin. So with that, I'm going to share my screen for a little PowerPoint presentation, and bear with me while I do this. And, I may indeed have a senior moment. James, I'm disabled from sharing, so you're going to have to allow me to share. Can you tell me when you've done that? Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you, James. All right. Let's see if I can get this going. All right. Everybody should be seeing the Awesome Osprey, or our 2020 Osprey Summer like no other. And believe me, it was like no other. It was like no other in a number of different ways. And today I'm going to highlight some of those ways. Okay. So first of all, let's just look at, I've decided to focus on 6 things that were different in my point of view. Number one, I've never seen so many fights for Harriet's attention. It just went on and on. And furthermore, there were a number of different suitors, not just one, but 2 or 3 or 4. I couldn't keep track of them all. And I'm watching the chat, so you can keep track of them all. And I know some of you actually keep much better records than I do. So chime in as I'm giving the presentation. I'm happy to share your information as well. And then this year we watched 3 of 4 eggs get tossed out of the nest. And I believe because of the color of the egg, that the egg that actually ended up hatching was one that Harriet rolled right back into the nest. So, my goodness, it was a matter of eggs being all over the place. And in fact, we still have an egg up in the nest that's quite visible from the web camera. So this is the first year we've had eggs cast out in previous years, but nothing like this year. And then it seemed like this summer we had a lot of hailstorms and high winds. And it was really fun to watch Harriet put up with all this. She's an incredible bird, just a wonderful mother who takes care of her single chick in this case, but her multiple chicks normally during whatever comes her way. And then the issue was that we had only 1 chick this year, which is very unusual. Harriet has had eggs that did not hatch, and she's had clutches of 2 and 3, but never 1 before. And so this was kind of unusual. And then the suitor that finally vanquished all other suitors, we called him Swoop because he sort of swooped in at the last moment and dispatched all of the other suitors. You could tell he was not a real experienced mate, as he had, issues incubating the eggs, etc. But let me tell you, he turned out to be an incredible fisherman. And we had a lot of fun this summer because it seemed like every male that ends up being a mate of Harriet fishes in different places. And this guy came up with some really interesting fish. And then I've never seen such a feisty little toddler as Lucky was. I've never seen one of the chicks before outright attack Harriet, but this guy did. He was, a terrible 2-year-old or a terrible toddler who was aggressive in all kinds of ways that were unique. Okay, So let's go through these one by one. Let's first of all look at these fights for Harriet. And I'm going to show you a bunch of slides that I took on one day. And I actually had to go through both the Nest camera and the backup Nest camera to get all of the action. This was on April 22nd of this last year, and it just wouldn't stop. It started out at 6:30 in the morning, 6:23. This shows Harriet with the bird that we were calling Howler. And the way I could identify him on this particular day is he had a blood stain underneath his right wing, at the top of his right leg, and kind of covered by the wing at times. But and he also had a dark necklace. And there were so many male ospreys coming this day that it was almost impossible to keep track of them. And I had to go through frame by frame from the recorders to make any sense of it at all. But that was the identifier that I used for what we were calling at that time Howler. Okay, so at 6:23, there's Howler and Harriet. And at 7:30, this is our first intruder. And notice he has a lack of necklace and very faint markings on his leg. He has almost no dark feathers on his leg or on his chest. So I use this as an identifier for this particular bird. And this guy arrives at 7:31, okay? So then we go on, and at 8:30, Howler comes back with a fish. And again, you can see the blood stain on him, so we know that this is Howler. But the nest is attacked almost immediately. So Howler takes off with his fish in tow to take care of the intruder, all right? And so that you see him flying off there, and Harriet on the perch, ready to come down to get that nice fish, but off he goes. All right? So then he comes back moments later with the fish in hand to hand off to Harriet. Okay? And then by 10:08, Harriet's pretty much done that fish in, and here comes another intruder. And here's what I was calling Mr. Longstockings. And again, this came from the backup camera. You couldn't see the bird very well from the Nest camera, so I went to the Nest backup camera, and I got this photo of him, and you can see the long marks on his right leg and go all the way up his leg, almost to underneath his wing. Well, and again, a faint necklace. So let's keep track of that particular guy, all right? So then by 11:04, this time a fish is brought to her by Mr. Longstockings. This is clearly not Howler. He doesn't have the blood on him, and he has, like I said, this really long stocking, dark feathers running up his legs. And he lands with the fish, and he mantles it. She's not all that crazy about him having landed there, but she tolerates him, and he mantles his fish. Ultimately, he eats his fish on the perch, and then Harriet comes up there, and he successfully mates with her. All right? So this is notice the clock. This is at 12 p.m., and by 12:30, he has mated with her at least once. Okay, so at 1, so it's a half an hour later, there seems to be 3 males that show up at the nest. Howler, which you can tell by the blood spot, and then this guy who doesn't have much dark markings on him, and you can see Howler trying to make an attempt to land. You can tell it is him by the blood spot on him. So just constant action between 1 and 2:30. And you can see, here comes Mr. Longstockings again, just as Harriet is taking off, and the first intruder of the day is departing. So there are birds coming and going all over the place. And by 4:12 p.m., Mr. Longstockings, that's what I've called him, has landed on the nest, and he pushes one of the eggs out. He thinks because he's mated with Harriet that he's here to stay. Well, maybe, maybe not. Okay, so later in the day, by 5:30, we have Mr. Longstockings falls off the nest as an intruder comes. Now, look at the intruder. He has almost no necklace and no markings on his legs that are visible from these particular perspectives. So Mr. Longstockings gets flipped off the nest, and this Mr. White guy, I'll call him because he has so few dark feathers, made an attack. All right. So then there's another attack. And it looks like the same kind of Mr. White, who doesn't have any kind of a necklace, is back at it. So it's not Howler. It's Mr. Longstockings, Mr. White, and Howler at this point. So there are at least 3 males that we've identified by their markings. There may have been more because there were times when you just couldn't keep them apart. Okay. So I'm going to show you now some more videos which really show how fierce these fight goes. And this is not videos, but photos that I took from the backup camera on a particular day. And these photos, it just covers a single fight. But boy, these fights were fierce. So I'm going to flip through a number of slides here on the same place, and you can see the progression. So you've got one bird landing, you've got Harriet taking off, and you've got another bird in the sky that you can see on this particular thing. And then you have, and again, look at it. This is Howler, because you can see the blood spot on his right, at the top of his right leg. He's flying over. Harriet's on the nest, okay? And then you can see there is another guy, and they are really going at it. This is Howler and probably Mr. Longstockings, but you don't really get a good view of him. But look how this fight erupts, and I mean, it is physical. This is they're taking no prisoners. They're out for blood, these two birds. It's just quite amazing. I don't think I've ever seen such fierce fighting before at the nest. Okay, so my question is, and I'd like to have some of you who are watching, who have kept track of all of this, is Mr. Longstockings or Mr. Swoop? And I guess if I were pressed, I'd have to say yes. And if you look at, I tried to juxtapose 2 of the photos that really show the legs, which, you know, have a really dark markings running way up the side of the legs. And then they both have very little dark on their chest. I mean, there is something of a necklace there. And in other photos, particularly of Swoop, you were able to see something of a necklace, but not much of a necklace. And then if you look at the heads, they're not exactly the same, the markings on the heads, but they're similar. And again, this can be because, I mean, in the lower photo, Swoop has just brought a fish, so they're both bringing a fish, so their heads are wet, possibly wet, and the feathers may be a little bit discombobulated. But you see that there's white that comes all the way down to the beak on both birds, and they're kind of separating this, patch of dark in the middle. So, what do you think? What do you think this is? I mean, do you think Swoop is Mr. Longstockings? That's my vote. And I'd like to see some responses in the chat to see if we can say that Swoop is Mr. Longstockings. Okay. So I've put together a series of short videos that I thought would be fun to go through because they sort of demonstrate what was going on here. And so this first video is about the eggs. Let's just take a watch here. Now this is from the Nest backup camera. No, it's from the actual Nest camera, but I didn't put the audio on for some reason. I can't say why. I think it's because I end up with the backup camera as well. So this is her second egg that she laid. Okay, and egg number 3 then gets kicked out. This is all in the same day. And you can see it goes to the edge of the nest. You can also see at the end of his tail feathers where one of the other eggs is lodged. And I do believe that egg is the one that's still there in the nest. So here is Harriet deciding to roll that egg back in. Look how colorful that egg is. It's got a lot of color on both sides. And it appears to me like she's looking to see if he's going to catch her. Because she looks around and then she rolls it. She looks around some more and she rolls it and kind of sneaks it under her. There it goes. She kicks it back under her, pulls it back under her so she can continue incubating it. Well, I know why we don't have sound. This was one of the days that our recordings goofed up, and I got this off the surveillance station that doesn't have sound. Okay, so then the 4th egg was laid on May 1st. And she gathers it in with the egg that she retrieved. And these are the 2 eggs that remained in the nest, and it's Swoop, or Mr. Longstockings, accepted. And he spent a fair amount of time incubating them as well, even though he had kicked out one of the eggs. So we really don't know whether that's his egg or not. But I think it's the one that hatched. Yeah, Celia, I didn't know or pay attention to the long brown stockings all summer either. But when I got back to looking at really carefully what distinguished these birds, I realized that he did have long stockings. And you can see it periodically when he brings fish. So the 2 photos that I showed you were, months apart. Yeah, I agree. There's about a 50% chance that this was Swoop's egg, but he'll never know that. One of the things that was also different about this year is this was the first year that a chick that was hatched here did not get banded. I'm glad that you added that photo, I love, because you can see Hal had long stockings. So we're wondering about that. Some of them don't have such long stockings. And if you look at it, Hal has white all the way down to the beak as well. These male birds are hard to keep track of, I will say, but I have to think that Swoop is not Hal. I don't think that the two of them are the same at all. And it may have been that that Hal was one of the ones that was in competition this spring. Yeah, I have to admit to a lot of confusion about the mail that we had this year. I don't think it was Hal. He acted differently. Would you guys not agree? Yeah. They behaved differently. Yeah, I agree, Celia. It was not Hal. It was definitely not Hal. But I'm not sure about Swoop and Mr. Longstockings. Yeah, I do think Hal showed up as well when the three were on the list. I agree. But I do know that one day, April 22nd, there were at least 3 males involved. You could see them. Mr. Longstockings, Howler, which had the distinctive cut on his leg, and then Swoop, or Mr. Longstockings, and Whitey, who had no long stockings and almost nothing on the chest. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next video here. I think we've seen enough of the egg laying. I don't know why. I'm going to fast forward to see if there's something that is important about why I went so long. Well, she gets back on there and lays them and incubates them both. Okay, so let's go to the next one. All right. So I think that's the same darn video. A little bit of an operator error here. Okay, this is Hail to Harriet. And this is a pretty dramatic take at night. Hail and lightning. Harriet has an expression that really tells you she's not enjoying it. Several times she right at the camera like, come on, stop. And Lucky's underneath here. I think he's fairly good size at this point. It never fails to impress me how resilient these birds are. Snow and rain and heat, he just takes it all in his stride. This is really Lucky breathing right in front of his group. He's kind of hanging out there a little bit. Your tail. You can see the wind and the whole thing rocking. just what it says. It seems like Harriet is more animated than she often can use in different forms. But she really just hunker down and kind of stay there at your knees. She's really, because she's not enjoying this at all. Really getting choked with this hair. It's just so clear to me with the intensity. And you can see the size of them on his feathers. I mean, all has to hurt a little bit. He's really getting closer. And there's that unhatched egg that he's still caring for. You know, that's an interesting thing that neither she nor Brooke tried to figure out after it was clear it was not going to hatch. So they never knew a chance to get rid of it. Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Turning down the volume of the video so you can hear me talk over. Thank you. That was a long night and a big storm for our Harriet. Looking pretty bedraggled, but she sure kept care of Lucky. Okay, so here's our little Lucky. And let's just take a look at him. This video covers the pip. and the hatch. And the first feeding, I believe. You can see movement in that egg. And you can also see how heavily colored that egg is. It never fails to excite me to see a chick come out of its egg. What a miracle of life. And there he is. So helpless. Such a good mom. She's a very experienced, good mom. Here he comes all the way out now. Raises his little head. I'll never get tired of these sights. Look how she keeps her talons all tucked under. Such a gentle mom. Fierce and gentle all in one package. She's been a really successful bird with the number of chicks that she's produced here that we've been able to follow. And I think she was here for several years before we had a web camera, because she certainly knew her way around. I'm sure she was here in 2010, and I know she was here in 2011 on. And here comes a fish. And again, look at those long stocky ducks. Boy, Swoop knew where to catch the big ones. Here's its first bites. I don't know who was operating the camera, but I sure want to thank both Isla and Celia for all the great camera operating duty they have done throughout since they've been, since they learned to operate the cameras. They've just done a real service to all of us. And I also love the way they keep me informed as to what's happening when, so I can go back and make videos, etc. So I really appreciate that. I want to thank both of you. Yeah, Swoop did turn out to be a great daddy. Harriet's a good teacher. She taught Hal and she taught Swoop. She's a demanding teacher, let's put it that way too. She doesn't put up with much. Except from her chicks, which we will see shortly. Those big eyes. You can still see the little egg tooth on its beak that it uses to open up the egg. also sloppy, can't control themselves. They always end up being covered in food these first feedings. The little bobblehead. What a funny little character. I always, when I get food around on my shirt, etc., I always tell people I look good in what I eat. I think that's how they figure it too. They look good in what they eat. I didn't know that, Celia, that the egg tooth is sometimes called a bob. It's having a difficult time separating the wheat from the shaft here, the fish from the wonderful duff. I tell you, Harriet makes a wonderful nest. Look at how she combines the hay and the duff, and she pulls the strips from the cottonwood trees. It's always a soft bed. She always ends up making a soft bed for her fish. She's a great nest builder. I just don't know what I'm going to do when she doesn't show up one year. It's going to be hard looking. Who knew you could come to love a bird so much just from watching it every year? She steps so gently around. And the other thing is, as you've noticed, is she keeps a very clean nest. She always tidies up after eating. And this is one of the reasons I'm kind of surprised that she didn't remove the egg. They remove the egg shells, or they'll ultimately remove the shell that Lucky came out of. But they didn't remove the egg. I found interesting. I don't know who captured this, who was operating the camera, but he did a great job. I know it wasn't me. He's getting pretty full. Gonna fall right over here. That was a really good first meal. And I think it started the pattern for this chick. This chick grew really fast. It was one well-fed chick. And I don't know if it contributed to its terrible toddler attitude, but it sure ended up with a terrible toddler attitude. Okay, so let's next take a look at Swoop the fisherman. And if you will recall, our Awesome Osprey project this year was about counting the number of fish that were brought to the nests and to identify the species. Michael identified the species. So if you remember, I had Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Tori Ritter come out and teach us a little bit about some of the fish that were in the Bitterroot River. And then I put together this video as kind of a fun way to test your knowledge of the various fish that were coming to the nest. And these were just some of the fish, because I know we saw several goldfish come to the nest. There's Lucky. Okay. Come on, guys. Tell me what fish this is. Take a look. Brush up on your fish identification. What a pretty bird. He or she had an attitude, but beautiful bird. Okay, this is a different species. Yes, already had a crop. This bird had fish in reserve. Yeah, it's a dead fish this time. Okay, here's this is the third fish, and this species is something you'll recognize right away because Swoop found a hole for these fish, and they were big. He brought some big ones in. Okay, you guys should be able to tell me what this fish is. Without hesitation. It's 4. Look at the size of these fish that Swoop was able to bring in. That last fish was the northern pike. Big fish, stripes on it. Okay. All right, your homework, ladies, is to go look up and see if you can come back with the correct names of those 4 fish. This PowerPoint will go up on our website. Okay, so let's go on to the next video. And this next video is, this is another, I'm going to go back a little bit here to make sure that I didn't miss I had one of him actually fishing in the river. No, we just saw that one, so I'll skip ahead. All right. Let's see, this one is, okay. He escapes an eagle. Yeah, this was a fun thing to watch on the river. And again, I don't know which one of you caught this on film, but you did a good job. Here comes Swoop, and you can see the fish dangling from his feet. And you can also see him shake his feathers. The ospreys are the only fish that can do that, by the way. And this was during a camera tour, I guess, when nobody was really manning the camera, but you still can see the action. Here comes Mr. Eagle looking for that fish, trying to get that fish from him. And he evades it. He's really good. You know, that eagle is still around, that bald eagle. Now, I oftentimes use the digital zoom and the slow motion to kind of help us focus a little bit, which I really like doing. Yeah, in slow motion, you see how he shook the water on? They're one of the only birds that can do that while they're in flight. And they do that, of course, to lighten their load. They're now loaded with a fish, and they don't need all this water weighing them down as well. What marvelous birds. So here he comes with his fish, and then the next thing we see is the eagle appear out of nowhere to try to get it from him. There he comes. And you can see, I'm sure this is the way Ozzy was killed. by what happened to him and by the marks on his body. That an eagle turned upside down and swiped at him. But they are want to do that. In fact, they wait in the trees and watch the osprey fish, and then they harass the osprey. It's easy to take a fish from an osprey, easier. And you can see this was just seconds later, so that's that same fish. And this was on one of his favorite perches, Swoop. So he clearly kept the fish throughout the episode and was able to bring it back and eat it. I don't remember what the date was, if he took it to the nest or not. It was a nice sized fish. This is where we last saw Swoop, was on this pole, mid-September. Oh, it said September 19th, so this is near the end of the time that he was here. This was right near the end. Thank you, Celia, for noticing. Okay, so I think our next video is also a fishing video. Let's just see. Where, again, somebody caught him actually fishing in the river. Yeah, this is in May. And again, I think this may have just been on one of the camera tours because we weren't able to follow the fish. But you can see that he caught a fish and was heading home for Harriet. Here you can watch him dive. They are so gorgeous. Out of a tree, and he goes. I love this part where you can see his wings just pull him up right out of the water. What magnificent birds. We are just so fortunate to have them nesting in what is basically our front yard. What a gift. Okay, so now let's take a look at our terrible toddler. I get a kick out of this little video. He just shows real attitude. Here she is, house cleaning, and happens to disturb him with his full crop, him or her, and it takes exception, doesn't like to be disturbed. So, just goes right over there and tells his mother in no uncertain terms that he wants the housekeeping to stop. Look at him, or it, or her. I'm sorry that we don't know. I wish that the scientists had been able to band the bird and take some blood so we would know whether it is a male or a female. But this was not the only time that we saw this little fellow or little gal. Look at the crop on him. My goodness. Go for its mother when it didn't like what was happening at the nest. It was clearly a bird with attitude. Okay, and then I have another short video. This was the first year that we had ever seen a banded bird that was hatched here try to land on the nest. We'd seen our banded birds at other nests, but not at our nest. And in fact, scientists say that they don't return to their natal nests, but clearly Congo did. And this is a short video of him returning, trying to return. And here you can see pretty clearly the band on that. And Harriet, I mean, Swope just pushes him right off. And rightfully so. They've got little Lucky in the nest. This is from the nest backup camera because you could actually see the band. And I may have a digital zoom on it as well on this. I don't remember. I think I do so you can read it. And he comes right back. I sure am glad we installed that perch several years ago. That's turned out really well. Here he went again. Kind of really wanted to stop. So here comes with magnification. And you can see the band very well. I sent copies to the University of Montana scientists. They were surprised that it had come back to its natal nest. And it comes back again. All right. Now, for this last video, this is something I've been having fun with. I'm calling it Project 717. And I did not know that our wonderful tech guru, James, could program our Nest backup camera so that it took a snapshot routinely every day at a certain time. The reason I'm calling this 717 is I asked him to set it up so that it would take a photo at 7 in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and 7 o'clock at night. And the reason I chose those times is, throughout the summer, the sun keeps moving, the days get longer, but 7 is frequently, around early morning and early evening or even late evening as the sun changes throughout the season. But this was fun to put together, and I'm going to tell you, I tried to put music to it, and my abilities in the back room with the movie making equipment is not what it wants to be, but it's fun anyway. So let's take a look at this. This is in fast motion, almost an entire summer. I didn't start doing this until the end of April, so it starts at the end of April and goes through end of September. All right, here we go. All right. I had fun doing this, and I'd like some feedback as to whether you enjoy watching it, because I kind of liked seeing the weather change and the days change, and I'm even thinking about putting a direct camera down by the river so we can do the same thing at the river, particularly on that beach down there where you guys call the moose head, where the tree trunk looks like a moose head. So I kind of enjoy doing this just because it encapsulates everything that we did. It's 2:00. I can't believe I've taken all this time, but I really enjoy putting all this together and reliving. And I'm willing to bet that we have Mr. Michael Academia with us now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen in the hopes that he is there. There you are, Michael.
Hello, how's it going, Suzanne? Great to see you.
I am so glad to see you.
I'm so happy to see you. I'm so glad that you're well.
Yeah, we've missed you in these parts. And before we start talking about the Osprey, let me ask you a few questions about your graduate program. Number one, how have you settled into Virginia, and how are you liking it there?
Oh, yeah. I definitely have some photos to share when I'll share some of the information. But it's been really intense with all of the COVID restrictions. And in fact, I'm living on campus and all of my roommates evacuated within like the first couple of weeks. So I've been in complete isolation. So thank goodness, William and Mary has been really strict with their protocol and their procedures, so we've been okay compared to the rest of the schools. But no, it's been really tough and intense, and I've just been so humbled. It's really rigorous studying. I'm such a newbie. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, what an unusual year for all of us in every regard, and to start graduate school in lockdown. I hope that, how many years do you reckon you're going to be there, Michael?
For about 2 years, hopefully. But again, everything's just so uncertain, especially with all of the the field work and lab work that I have to do in coming spring and summer. So it all depends. And yeah, that's been, I think, part of the main source of stress is just the uncertainty and trying to work around with all of these things.
What a completely unusual graduate school experience. But you are such a resilient character, Michael. I just know you'll make the best of whatever comes your way. And that's an important quality to have in life.
It's for the sake of the ospreys and for the research that we do. That's what drives me.
Yeah. Well, very good. And
right.
So I assume that you have a PowerPoint program, and I'll turn the show over to you. But let me just say that we've just had so much fun with you last summer. I've relived some of the broadcasts that we did with some of the experts you lined up, and you just did an outstanding job, and we're all really grateful to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be here and to reminisce and share and show the results that I have so far. And I want this to be a conversation. So at any time, if anyone has any questions, if you have a question, and I may need some help explaining some of the advanced statistics. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, great.
Okay, let's see that. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Let me just move something.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Isn't this beautiful? I just wanted to show and showcase some of the scenic routes or scenic shots of the campus. And this is Crimdale. This is a very old school. And this has been here since, the 1700s. And this is funny because there's like a superstition here that if you cross this bridge by yourself, you're going to be alone for the rest of your life.
Oh my. Oh
I know. My. So you'll actually see students like walking around this where they can just cut right through. And you're supposed to walk this bridge with, a bunch of friends, with people that you know, people that you love, so that you can carry out your journey, through life with people that you care about.
So it is one of the oldest universities, is it not, in the United States?
It is. It would have been older than Harvard, but I think there was some weird war or something that we missed out on that. Huh. But this path leads directly to the Integrated Science Center. This is just, this is where all of the science magic happens with all of the labs and the data and all that good stuff. Couple more of historic areas on campus. This is a hall where we go to do our graduation ceremony. And to the right is Sadler Center, where we pick up our mail and eat some food. But here are portraits of King William and King Mary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Here on the left, we have the Earl Gregg Swim Library, which was rated one of the top U.S. college libraries around the nation. So that's a very esteemed honor there. And to the right, we have the Wren Building, and this is Sir Christopher Wren, who is a highly acclaimed English architect. And this is the oldest college building still standing in the United States. And it was constructed between 1695 and 1700.
My goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Very old.
Yeah. It's wonderful because that the United States just doesn't have the kind of history that other countries do. And so when you get something that old, it really is precious.
It is precious, and it really has an impact on you.
Yeah.
Here to the left, we have James Monroe, who is a graduate of William and Mary. He's was one of our presidents. And to the right, we have Thomas Jefferson, who also graduated from William and Mary.
Wow.
And supposedly George Washington took some classes at William and Mary too. So it's quite an honor to be in this lineage. Okay, so here we are at my presentation, the contribution of citizen science and Osprey web cameras. So before I proceed, this was a baby osprey involved in the study. And this was at Nest 5 at Barnegat Light, Ben Worth's Nest in New Jersey. And this baby osprey is in a total full-blown food coma. One moment eating, then boom, next moment, baby down, baby down. Great.
That's a great photo.
It is. So this is about the contribution of citizen science and Osprey web cameras to investigate the relationship of daily fish deliveries in relation to weather, brood size, and nesting success. In this presentation, I'll cover the protocol with the introduction, the methods, the results, and the discussion. And this is in the format of the Raptor Research Conference, what I'll be presenting hopefully next year or the year after. Now, at these conferences, they have these strict time constraints, like you only have like 10 to 12 minutes to like give all of your information. That's just really difficult to do, very nerve-wracking. But, I really like sharing this information to, our audience because we can take our time, we can have a conversation about it, which is nice. So this project is very important to me because it represents those who should not be excluded from science. Those who are elderly, retired, those who can't afford expensive birding gear or to travel, especially those who are ill and can't leave the comfort and safety of their own homes. And unfortunately with COVID, the world gets it now. But through technology, we can still be observers of the real world and take important data collection and be contributors to science. However, the scientific community does not regularly accept citizen science because it is deemed as it's not a legitimate method of scientific investigation, and beneficial results for science and society are going unrealized. And we talked about this before, Suzanne. One of the main reasons is that they believe that, the science that we do, the data that we are collecting, isn't rigorous enough.
Yeah.
And I totally believe that's not true, especially with, this past, with our Awesome Osprey project. We were very rigorous with just hours and hours of data observation during the holidays from dusk till dawn. Also, another.
The way we set it up with people randomly being assigned a nest, we tried to be as scientific rigorous as possible. And you can see both sides of this, can't you, Mike?
Oh, absolutely. So I think that's going to help us with our future project, is that we need to find a balance between, citizen science and the scientific community and mend that together. And we just did a lot of discovering with this project, and we'll move citizen science forward. Also, another reason why this project is so important.
Good.
But another problem too is that there's a broad range of skills, and the data that's being collected, it's problematic. Also, they believe that we need to have an established hypothesis first in order to design our research, so that we can have a proper analysis of that hypothesis. And most of the work that we do is descriptive. But, with the science and technology that we have now, we are able to do data mining and extrapolate really important information. So hence,
and I would contend that this takes place routinely in field science, because so often you don't know the hypothesis. You may be testing one hypothesis, but as the project unfolds, the data tell you something else, and it opens up new doors of inquiry. So there's really nothing wrong with these fishing expeditions. And once you get to the point where you have a lot of data, you can use the data itself to mine, as the observations. You can select from it, randomly select from the data that you already have, save a subsample. So I think, fishing for data is not something scientists don't do all the time.
Right, exactly. I wish I could take you to the Raptor Research Conference when you could defend me when they ask me these really difficult questions.
I've spent my life in the field research, and I can attest to, oftentimes pursuing a one hypothesis just opens the door to another one. So field studies that you think are going to take one summer or two end up taking 5 or 6, because as you learn, you modify what exactly you're looking at, because you'd be a fool not to take into consideration what you're learning along the way.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And that's why we're working together.
Yeah.
So yes, citizen science, under the right circumstances with direction and help from professionals, it can produce high quality data with
Yep.
reliable and valid scientific outcomes, which can lead to the unexpected insights and innovations that you were just talking about.
Yep.
So 19 nests all over the world were involved in this study. 4 nations, their respective organizations, and legions of citizen scientists. So this study represents us, represents all of you, and it's very important. But it also represents our beloved ospreys.
Yep.
Yep. So ospreys are highly charismatic, highly visible, and also they are high-profile species. So that means that they can bring their prey out of the water and they put them on display, which makes them ideal for nest web cameras. Also, they are tolerant of short-term nest disturbance. They easily habituate to humans, and they also exhibit strong nest fidelity. So, of course, private landowners such as Suzanne, nonprofit organizations, businesses, corporations, public utility companies, and universities have made viewing ospreys accessible at large via live broadcasts online, such as YouTube. So despite the wealth of information and the high participation rates from citizen science, not much science is being done or even being published. And emerging science from citizen science should illuminate topics we know least about, such as daily fish deliveries and how that relates to weather, brood size, and nesting success. And this led to one of our research questions, and it's that through citizen scientists and web cameras, what is the relationship of daily fish deliveries to each nest in relation to these predictor variables, to weather, brood size, and nesting success? Therefore, the main objective of this study is to investigate the relationship of daily fish deliveries to these predictor variables and to identify which of these predictor variables are significant or most significant. Okay, so now we're in the methods. And to sum it up, data was collected from 19 nests from 1 to 7 seasons. Immediately, this will give you a clue that the data is highly variable. But to ensure high quality data and to minimize bias, the selection of nests included these criteria, with the first and the last being the most important. Direction and oversight from professional or academic organizations, and organized data validated by quality assurance protocols. Also, the information had to come from publicly available data, the nests were active, and also we needed the ability to play back or review the broadcasts. Data collection terminated when nests failed, cameras went offline or failed, upon successful fledging or post-fledge. Now, if you look to the photos to the right, here I've highlighted in red some fish deliveries. Now, they may look like the same fish, but upon closer inspection, they are not the same fish. And here on the bottom right is an illustration depicting the quality assurance protocols that some of the teams adopted. And the main important emphasis here is that there were quality assurance protocols and oversight, because this could have been a source of pseudo-replication. Pseudo-replication means that there could have been some overcounting and undercounting, which could bias the data.
Mm-hmm.
So I harvested the meteorological conditions from NASA and NOAA, and the meteorological variables chosen were wind speeds at 10 meters height, surface pressure, precipitation, and average temperature. So let's focus now on the more important predictor variables. And I had to talk to my advisor about this, Dr. Brian Watts, because initially I was just focusing on the weather conditions, but he said that there is an underlying lurking variable that I need to add into the model. And that's definitely related with brood size and nesting success, because this is more directly related to food shortage, which is more appropriate, reflecting nesting success or failure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here it gets a little complicated. So part of the methods for the conference, I have to talk about the statistics, but I'm just going to briefly go over this. And, there with technology and the software now, we can really do some amazing things, and it's so high powered. And I'm using RStudio, which is a high powered software to analyze the data. And I'm using generalized linear mixed modeling, also known as GLMM. Basically, it's just advanced statistical modeling, and it uses probability distributions as building blocks for modeling. Mm-hmm. Modeling is basically just a mathematical representation of the observed data. And by applying these mathematical representations to the data, we're able to investigate, understand, and interpret the information more strategically. Therefore, we can identify relationships between the variables. We can make predictions about future data sets and visualize data so that non-analysts and stakeholders can consume the information and leverage it. Was that a decent explanation, Suzanne? Anything to add to?
And I was going to say that one of the most important aspects of modeling is that it really makes you identify all of the assumptions that you are putting into the model and all of the data sources, and it exposes what things you know a lot about and what things you don't know much about. So I think in terms of its predictability, making predictions is a really important result, but so too is what you learn from the exercise, because it really makes you, be very careful about how you build it, because it's only, the predictions are only as good as the data and the relationships that are in the model are. So it's a way of organizing a lot of very complex relationships and processes and data sources into a single model. But I've often found that through modeling, you identify, again, it's like fishing. You identify, well, I need to know more about this aspect because there's such variability on that aspect that it can blow the model up one way or another.
Yes, exactly. A great explanation, Suzanne. And part, being a master's student, not only do I have to effectively communicate this to the professional scientific community, I'm supposed to be able to explain this to a general audience as well. So, and that's not an easy task at all.
No, it's not. And I think that what you try to do is use examples that people understand from their own daily life, the relationship between things. And telling it through stories, I've often said that the data should drive the story, but the story is the vehicle for understanding the data.
That's great, Susanna. Yeah, I wish you were on my advising committee.
Well, this is an area I love.
We'll be working together in the future for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now in the results. Now, this may seem a little overwhelming, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but let me just briefly explain what this is. On the x-axis, the horizontal axis here, we have all of the 19 nests. Here on the vertical axis, we have fish being delivered per day. So to help me explain this, we're just going to focus here on MT1, which represents Dunrovin Ranch.
Yeah.
So these are called box plots, and box plots are just visualizations that are used to represent the data. Mm-hmm. So you can see here that this box has these lines called whiskers and also these other points of data. So this is just the spread of the data. And the dots here actually represent the outliers, mm-hmm. which is part of the set, but not included in the whole set. So my analysis, I'm going to focus the generalized linear mixed modeling specifically to Dunrovin, and I've had to account for the variation between the seasons. But if you look to the left, I just wanted to highlight this. This is Maine. This is a very famous nest in Maine called Hog Island. And you can see that the range of the daily fish deliveries was just really weird. Like, in fact, there were some outliers where they had almost over 30 fish being delivered per day. Wow. And I
Yeah.
talked to, the moderators, the main contacts there, and they said they were just all small fish, hence the high number.
Right. Right. So that's a really interesting thing because one would want to look at the biomass of food being delivered as opposed to the numbers, and that's where knowing the species is important. One can estimate some of those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And linking the bridge between ornithology and fisheries sciences is very difficult because we need that information, especially in terms of prey biomass. But fisheries is so difficult. It's because like you're trying to quantify and qualify ghosts. They're difficult. They're almost intangible.
Right. Well, and then there's the nutrient value of different fish. I would assume that eating, 2 grams of fish A is not equivalent to eating 2 grams of fish B. I mean, there's a lot, and this is where the modeling really helps you identify. But, it would really be nice to know this. So it would make all the difference in the world if we understood that component of it. So
I'm glad you highlighted that because that's part of my master thesis. Here at Chesapeake Bay, we have the world's largest breeding population of osprey, and they're highly dependent on Atlantic menhaden. And the osprey population here are known to be menhaden dependent. And of course, they can catch other fishes here, but menhaden, just has such high amount. Their nutrients are very dense, especially with thiamine and also lipids that provide a lot of energy for ospreys, and they depend on menhaden to be successful. So fish are not interchangeable. Sometimes they need a specific source in order to thrive.
Yeah.
But again, that gives you an idea of the high variability between all of these nests. Okay, let's proceed. So these are violin box plots, and within the violin box plots are the traditional box plots, and I'll briefly describe them. On the x-axis, the horizontal axis, we have nesting success, and 0 represents the seasons at Dunrovin where we experienced failure. Mm-hmm. And 1 are the seasons we experience success. Mm-hmm. On the y-axis, we have fish being delivered per day. Mm-hmm. So let's focus here on the left with this violin box plot, and this represents the seasons of failure. And the violin box plots, it just illustrates the frequency of the data and also the density. So here you can see how there's this width here, and what this is saying to us that with the failed seasons, most of the fish, the number of fish being delivered were very low, like around 1 or 2. And here, this black horizontal line is the median, which is just the middle number of the fish being delivered per day. But you can see here that the range, the outliers go all the way to like 7. But the majority of the data was in the lower amount.
And let's explain to our viewers that this data was routinely collected by the University of Montana because that particular year was 2012 when the nest failed. They had pigs, but neither of them hatched. So you got this data directly from Project Osprey at the University of Montana, did you not?
And also from I Love Grandkids, who just had such a vast treasure trove of data.
Yes.
Just
let's give a shout out.
Shout out to I Love Grandkids. I mean, without you, this wouldn't be possible. It is amazing amount of rigorous work that you have done, comparable to all of the experts. I mean, to the exact photo every day, all day, through the holidays. I mean, just amazing.
Yeah. Did you hear that, I Love? Are you there? That's great.
And to the right.
He's saying she doesn't want everybody to know.
Oh. I just had to.
Oh, no, it's true. And that's very common in citizen science that you get 1 or 2 people who are really, really dedicated to the project, and they could just be invaluable.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are heavy hitters, I call them, throughout all of the nests, and they provided information like this.
Yeah.
So to the right here are the seasons with nesting success, and you can see that the violin box plot has a different distribution, and also the box plot within. So the range is different, and there are more fish being delivered in the higher numbers, like above 3 or 4 or 5, and going all the way up to 15. So this blue line with the shaded area here represents the actual model. And what this is saying is that when we have seasons that we have nesting success, more fish are being delivered. And that it is highly significant, which in the scientific community, we refer to this p-value. And the p-value is also known as the probability value. And trying to relate that to the real world, I often use dice, the rolling of the dice, or flipping a coin. That your results. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Well, and again, the p-value relates to the null hypothesis, and so the null hypothesis in this case is that they are the same. And what you're saying is that the p-value is 1 in 1,000 that you would be wrong if you accepted that. So you're saying, that they are different. So what it is it's the probability of being wrong if you accept the null hypothesis, and that's why the gray area gets tighter as you get more chicks. There's less variability than you have fewer chicks. The no chicks are versus many chicks. Isn't that the gray is the degree of variation, or how well you can predict something?
Exactly. It's our confidence interval. And that was a great explanation with the p-value, Suzanne. Thank you.
Well, no, I just it's that's where the null hypothesis comes in. It's the probability that you're wrong if you reject it.
Right.
Yeah, and generally the rejection is you're saying that they're the same, and so if you can reject that they're the same, but doesn't mean that you've proven that they're different. It just means you've accepted, you've rejected that they're the same. And then there are one-sided tests. You could say that one of the null hypotheses is that one is greater than the other, as opposed to just being different.
And that was one of the most difficult things, learning the p-value and trying to explain that and give explanations to our professors, is they test you. What is the p-value? And there's just so many different explanations, and everyone has different interpretations of the p-value. So it's very difficult to interpret sometimes. Yeah, but it is conditional.
Yeah, it depends on what question you're asking in terms of the null hypothesis. But the cleanest one is just that they're different. You're testing whether they're the same. So the null hypothesis is this one's equal to that one, and you've rejected that, and you'd only be wrong about 1 in 1,000 times by saying that.
Great. All right, so the next variable that we're going to look into is brood size. So on the horizontal axis, the x-axis, we have brood sizes of 0. Now, these were the seasons where, we may have had 1 or 2 eggs, but eventually they all went to 0, or they died somehow. And to the right, we have brood sizes of 1, 2, and 3. On the y-axis, we have fish being delivered per day. So again, with the violin box plots and the box plots, you can see how the data distribution was very different, where the densities of the fish deliveries occurred. So when you had 0, you had maybe around 1 or 2 fish being delivered. But once you have brood sizes of 1 or higher, more fish were definitely being delivered. Then when you get up to brood sizes of 3, you can see that there were high amounts of higher fish being delivered per day, all the way up to, past 10.
So I have a question here, Michael.
Yes.
We started out several times, I think 3 times, with brood size of 3 that 1 did not survive. So they dropped down into brood size of 2. But the brood size of 2, they were more mature chicks. So now they fall into that group that started out with 2, as opposed to those who had 3 and now we're down to 2. But they are at a later stage in their development, which generally means more fish.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors you have to control for, and this goes back to what you were talking about with the model. That's exactly the kind of thing you have to control for. So again, you don't have to know the ins and outs of it, but you just have to know that there are all these complicating factors that in a mathematical model, what you try to do is eliminate those as sources of variability.
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting that. I nailed it right on target, and that's why I chose the generalized linear mixed modeling to account for variation and factors like this within the seasons. And when you publish this, they will ask you, well, how did you account for this? How did you account for that?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, according to the model, the blue line with the shaded area, as we have higher brood sizes, more fish will be delivered per day, and that's strongly significant in the model.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, very highly evident.
But I would also point out that you still have a very low p-value of making a mistake. I mean, you're still your model tells you that there's a definite relationship between bird size and number of fish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so now it gets really interesting. So now we're going to look, on top of brood size and nesting success as being the main drivers, we're going to look with the additional. Right. So I was, really surprised with some of this. So scatter plot. Now this is just a different representation of the data points. Instead of the box plots, we actually have points that represent all of the observed data of fish being delivered per day. So this is average wind at 10 meters height at meters per second on the x-axis. I know we're here in America, we're not used to the metric system, so I converted the meters per second into miles per hour so that we can get, a better grip on what this information is.
Right.
So we can see here that most of the fish were being delivered within, this range here, which is about, in between 4.5 to 7 miles per hour. But we still had fish being delivered, with more wind, like reaching up to 9 miles per hour or more. And the great thing about Dunrovin is that compared to the other nests, this is like relatively low wind. So this is really good real estate because wind is not so high.
Well, I also want to ask you again, as a conflating factor, ocean as opposed to rivers, as opposed to lakes. So you have the wind's impact on those bodies of water are quite different. And I would also say that wind direction is different. The ocean, depends on the tide, whether you've got, the tide coming in and the wind. And, if you've ever lived around the ocean, and I lived in an area in Alaska where the pressures on boats would be a combination of the surface wind and the tide. So you have a conflating factor of tides in the ocean that you don't have in lakes or rivers, but in rivers you have a current. And so you have a water depth and the amount of the volume of water in the river, which can be as more impactful, I would say, than wind, because
Absolutely.
When we flood, So those are really interesting things because you have nests on all of these places, lakes, rivers, and the ocean.
All of it. Yeah, very, very, very interesting. And you have to account for all of the...
Yes. And so again, that goes back into the model. When you start to model, you start asking yourself these questions. Mm-hmm. And as I said, that's one of the beauties of modeling, is it really makes you dive deep. Yeah.
And it can guide you with your future research. Again, so that's very important why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So according to the model, it does show that there is a trend that, there were less fish being delivered as wind speeds increased. Yeah. However, it was not significant. What that's saying, I think, is that the dominance factor of the brood size and the nesting success is just such a powerful driver.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to average temperature here on the x-axis. And to the right here, I have the translation of degrees Celsius into degrees Fahrenheit. And here we can see that most of the fish, were being delivered as temperatures increased. And according to the model, there was a strong significance that as average temperature increased, more fish were being delivered. Now, I have to be very careful in how to interpret this data, especially when I presented this to some of my professors. And this is probably due to seasonal effects. And I'll show you later on in this presentation how to account for that. But this is what the model shows.
Yeah, I think that, as the temperatures increase, the chicks get larger because you're at the season. But I would also suggest that, and this would be really interesting to do at the Dunrovin nest, when it's really hot, midday deliveries can be really important for chicks because that's when they get their moisture. They don't drink. They get their moisture from food. And so there's a dehydration issue that could be going on under really extreme high temperatures.
And that could pose a very dangerous threat towards ospreys. So like the thing here, like what's really important here, especially with average temperatures rising all over the world with climate change, this would be something really important to look at over time. So it'd be definitely very important to continue the research, continuing taking the observations throughout time. So this is, data collection that we'll continue to do. It has a lot of important implications. Okay, just a couple more. This is surface pressure. So on the x-axis, we have kilopascals, and I converted it to atmospheres, which is just moving the decimal point to the left. But what this is showing is that most fish were being delivered in this range, in the mid-range here, about 84 to 85. And according to the model, there is a trend that shows that more fish were being delivered as surface pressure increased, but it wasn't significant enough. So, very interesting, right?
Very interesting. I don't know how to make what to make out of that, other than surface pressure is certainly related to temperature.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, and so there's that. This is interesting because ferreting out the impact or the influence of these individual factors is going to be tricky.
It is tricky. They don't interact. That's another thing that I'm going to have to ask, my professors, because there's these interactions. And when it comes to all these weather variables, temperature seems to be like at the core of everything. But temperature with surface pressure, you have moisture. Then temperature plus, surface pressure, you have precipitation and how that moves everything else, and that will create wind. So it's just all complex.
Right. It is complex, but it's important, as you point out, in terms of climate change. Very important.
Right. Okay, lastly, we're going to look at precipitation in millimeters. And according to the model, as precipitation increases, less fish will be delivered. And the great thing about Dunrovin, we don't have, heavy rains. In fact, the most rain we received on a day was about, 1.2 inches. Where in other nests, like we had like torrential downpours, and it was really difficult for the ospreys to forage. But according to the model, less fish as precipitation increased, but again, not significant, which is really interesting. Right. So according to the model, the main things that are important are the brood size, nesting success, and average temperature. But
if I were going to give you a suggestion, I would ask that if I were on your committee, which of course I'm not, but I do think that the body of water in which most of the fish are being found for an osprey's nest really has a major impact, because you can see that more precipitation, even if it's in small amounts over a large area like a river, really makes a huge difference in the number of fish that come. I mean, we've seen that between the Hellgate nest and the Dunrovin nest. The Hellgate nest is on a watershed with a much larger surface area, much larger. So the fluctuations in the Clark Fork River are much greater when it floods than it is in the Bitterroot. And consistently, our nest does better than theirs because they are prevented from fishing in high water.
Definitely an important point. I think for future research, we can add that into the model, especially if we can get gauge readings on how high the river is going and see if that's correlated to like turbidity, because when rivers get washed out, ospreys can't see their fish. So We could also get Seiki depth recording. Seiki depth is like when you have like this little disc that you lower into the water and you can measure visibility. That'd be another important data point to put into the model.
Yeah.
So again, this research can go anywhere.
Yeah,
lots of room for improvement. Okay, so I know this is a little complicated, but I had to account for average temperature. And here on the left, on the x-axis, is the Julian date, which is basically you have 365 days in the year, and this is just a numerical representation of the days throughout the season. So we can see here that we collected data, at day 100 to 250. And on the y-axis, you can see that this is average temperature. Mm-hmm. But not all information is linear. So what this represents is a cyclical effect of average temperature. And you have to account for this into the model. So I had to apply a trigonometric regression to the model to account for seasonal effects. And here on the right, we have a figure with the Julian date on the x-axis on the fish, and the fish being delivered per day. But the main emphasis here is to focus on the blue line, and you can see that this is just not a linear representation. In fact, this is a cyclical phenomenon, and this looks like a cosine or a sine function. Mm-hmm. So average temperature, as fish being delivered per day as a function of average temperature, what this model is suggesting is that it's a function of seasonal effects.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we are in the discussion. So here's some evidence that substantiates weather-mediated provisioning rates. So here's some literature that determined that higher wind speeds had detrimental impacts. And according to our model at Dunrovin, there was a trend showing that, less food was being delivered with higher winds, but it wasn't significant. But that's not the same at all at the other nests, which is really interesting, right? And next, we have provisioning rates decline during rain spells. So more precipitation, less fish were being delivered. Again, according to this model for Dunrovin, there was a trend that showed that, but wasn't significant enough. Mm-hmm. Provisioning rates increased when temperatures rose. According to our model, yes, this was highly significant and true. And furthermore, stable to falling atmospheric pressure stimulated food intake in birds. So this was somewhat of a gray area with our data, because our data showed that, there was a lot of fish being delivered in the mid-range, but also that as surface pressure increased, more fish were being delivered. Here at the upper right, we have baby Lucky in a food coma. Great to see. That's what we want to see. But here, highlighted in red, these baby ospreys died to food starvation. It's very sad to watch with the citizen scientists. The upper nest was at Osayus in Canada, and then the bottom was the nest at Cowlitz. Again, very difficult to watch when they go into food starvation. Their eyes bulge, they go into heavy breathing, and they eventually collapse and they go into rigor mortis. Very hard to watch, food starvation.
To watch, yep.
Here to the left, we have evidence that substantiates the contrary, that bad weather did not incapacitate ospreys to provision their young, limit food deliveries, reduce prey size, and constrain brood size. So again, it was just really important, critical to add the predictor variables of brood size and nesting success into the mix. So therefore, the ultimate cause of nest failure may often be food shortage, while bad weather conditions, although are important, are just proximate causes. Mm-hmm. That's what I have for now. Anything to add with that, Suzanne?
No, I just think this is fascinating. I'm really happy that you have put this together so well. I think you're just doing an excellent job.
Thank you. Good to hear. So here are all of the organizations that I'm so thankful for who participated. Here's my literature cited. And I wanted to close on a really cool fish delivery. This was at the Savannah Nest in Georgia. And around the 12th second, we'll see what this fierce fledgling brought into the nest. This was one of her first fish that she brought to the nest. And that is a shark. So we were really impressed that she did that.
Tiny little shark. Look at that.
A tiny little shark. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, did they have a single chick there as well?
Oh, there were two at this nest, and this was the eldest. Okay, and with that, I would like to open up the floor to comments, questions, suggestions, remarks.
Well, I want to know if when talking about citizen science, there's the scientific rigor, the scientific results, but then there's the impact on the citizens from having participated at all. And I see that from my perspective, citizen science is a wonderful learning process for people because they really begin to understand what goes into all of the scientific inquiries. And it increases people's understanding not just of the particular program that they're involved in, but of science in general. So is there going to be anything in that included in what you're looking at? Or are you looking at this solely from producing valid scientific results?
I'm definitely going to be placing that in the discussion. I want to formulate the right things to say to include in the manuscript, and also when I give a presentation to the scientific community. So I'm definitely open to suggestions in how to emphasize that. But it's a really important point. I really want to, combine the communities together. At this point, we really need to work together, and I need to address that. Absolutely.
I think it's a really important issue because I think you can teach people to collect very good data. They need somebody like you to analyze it for sure. I mean, it doesn't need to be under a professional, guidance for sure when you're looking at something this complex and this quantitative in nature. But you can take something simple like the Christmas bird counts that Audubon has been doing for many, many years, and that's been very helpful to show distribution of birds has changed because of a variety of things, but it provides this basis of information that again leads to some of the hypotheses that scientists might want to look at in the field. So, and then there's just the learning that takes place by them doing it. We're running out of time on the
we are.
We have somebody else coming on at 3. So I want to open this up to questions or comments to our viewers. You had a lot of comments. People, not many questions. I think you've covered a lot of the questions that people already had. But people are just delighted to have you back. And, there's a reward on our side of the fence to know that it's being used wisely and it's contributing to the understanding of the birds we care about. I think that's the other aspect, not just the educational aspect, but the gratification of having been involved.
Absolutely. And it's just such meaningful work. And again, I wanted to, highlight all those who are involved and to thank you, Suzanne, who's making this, available to us. It's really important for us to do this work. And it's been a lot of people's saving grace to have this. Again, I mentioned earlier that, people who are elderly or retired or who have illnesses, they needed like lifelines. And I've had this comment from all the other nests that people who are involved in this need something like this and have enriched their lives. Yeah. And again, I really want to have that impact with the scientific community and how important this work is for us. Yeah.
I think both ways, both in an educational, but in an emotional, like you say, mental health. It's reestablishing a connection to nature for a lot of people who don't get out there. So I did have a question. She asked, when was the last time you saw ospreys right at William and Mary? Do you see ospreys right in the area?
Great question. Thank you, I love. I wish I did find some overwintering ospreys, but I have not seen any. They all went south. And that was in about September. So that was the last time I saw osprey. But they're all over the place here. Like, it's just amazing. I'm in osprey heaven.
Yeah. they'll come back a little earlier than they do here. Is that not right on the coast?
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true. In fact,
beginning of March. Yeah.
In fact, in Florida, there's a couple of nests that have already started. They're pairing. They've started copulating. So Florida starts early.
Yeah. Yep. That's fabulous. It's wonderful. Well, I can't tell you how glad I am to just see you again and to work with you again.
Very nice. Very heartwarming. It's great to see you. I'm glad you're staying well.
Yeah, I wish you the happiest of holidays. Are you going back to California, or are you going to stay put?
Definitely not. The numbers in California are ridiculous. I think one day they had about 26,000 counts in one day.
Yeah.
My family's in Southern California, the worst part. So they're on lockdown. They have curfews. There's no way I'm going there.
Yeah. No, I think you're very smart. And I think all of us have to be smart during these winter months, because even though the vaccine started coming today, just today, we're months away from being, where we can go back out and really enjoy ourselves. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Not all of us have access to the vaccines yet. So, we have to wait.
Right. Exactly. Well, a great pleasure. Thank you for coming back, Michael. And thank you for all this wonderful work that you're doing. And I just couldn't be more thrilled that, we were included in your project.
Oh, thank you so much. It's mutual. The feelings are mutual. Really great to see you. We'll be working again in the future.
Good. Great. Keep in touch, and I'll be bugging you in March.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Keep doing the good job.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Bye.